Mr. Brian, we want to start our interview if you are okay with it.
Yes, I'm good.
So we want to start from a question that would be a basic introduction of yours. So can you please tell us about yourself?
I am a geologist by training and have over 30 years experience in environmental consulting, mostly in hazardous waste, hazardous materials, and also in stream and wetland mitigation. Writing is an avocation of mine, something I do because I can't not do it. And so that's how I got to where I am today.
All right, that's interesting to know. So which writers did you enjoy reading since your childhood, and how did you ended up being a poet?
As a child, I read a lot of science, paleontology, archaeology, and a lot of science fiction. My early favorite writers were Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Robert Silverberg. I started writing poetry as an assignment when I was in junior high / middle school, whatever you would know it as there. And I found that I enjoyed it and started continuing it. And I started reading with more enthusiasm the poets in classes. Early on, I enjoyed the poetry of Ogden Nash, who wrote a lot of humorous poetry, but when you looked at it closely, there was a lot of depth and a lot of edge to his poetry. And I would recommend reading his poetry. There's a lot going on in it besides the humor. Dylan Thomas is another very good poet. But the ones that I stumbled on in my career that have influenced my writing the most have been Rumi, Hafez, Anne Sexton, John Donne. And when I stumbled across Basho, when I started discovering Zen poetry, that really changed my style, because I used to write kind of really lush, wordy poetry. And when I came across Zen poetry, it really started to enjoy it. I started trying to concentrate my poetry to fewer and fewer words and saying as much as possible in the fewest possible words. And I have jokingly said, my goal is to be able to write a poem that says everything in one word.
That's very interesting. Sabah will, I think, reconnect in a moment. In the meanwhile, I'd like to talk about some of the names that you mentioned as influences. It's quite a diverse group of people in terms of periods of history and style. What is the common thread in their work, if any, that resonates with you so particularly?
For me, it has been the passion in their work. I find that all of them have a very deep-seated common thread of passion for what's happening in their life, what they're expressing, what they're experiencing, that comes out in their work. And that's something I want to try and convey in my work.
You have talked about that how Rumi influenced your poetry. So can you tell us a bit detail that how your poetry changed since you started writing till now?
My early poetry was very maudlin, sappy, romantic poetry. As I have grown older and wiser and more jaded, my poetry has become shown a lot more melancholy, romantic poetry in there, and also looking at life as a lot more of a series of gambles. You win some, you lose some, but you will never win if you don't play the game, so to speak. If you understand my expression, you may lose this time, but if you quit, you're never going to accomplish what you want. You have to keep getting up. You've heard the saying about you can fall 7 times, but you have to get up the 8th time.
Connecting to this idea of therapy, when you are able to get the thought across, it feels cathartic. But have you ever come across a thought you've been unable to express fully in a poem? Have you tried to express it regardless? And if so, have you been satisfied with the result?
There are some things I simply cannot get down in a poem. I've tried and I can't. I can talk about them to people, but I cannot satisfactorily write about them in a poem.
Yes, sometimes the thought and the poem can feel quite inaccessible. Poetry, generally speaking, is often placed on a high pedestal and made to feel inaccessible for the rest of us. Today's youth struggle to engage with it due to both that apparent prestige as well as our other engagements, obligations, etc. What advice would you offer such poets, and how would you encourage students to get involved with poetry?
One, stop taking poetry so seriously. And I don't mean that in a facetious way. If you stop and listen, poetry is all around you, even in just how people speak in everyday language. A lot of just how people speak, there's in their normal pattern of speech, their cadence, you can hear rhythm, alliteration and such, that if you pay attention to it, you hear things that are part of what people think of as poetry, and realize that it's really part of your everyday, that idea is part of your everyday life. Second, we have kind of started separating poetry as high art away from things like popular music, when poetry and music were originally part and parcel. Like poems were originally sung. And we really need to kind of get that back to a sense of connection, that poetry is a verbal art. And while I'm not wild about a lot of hip hop, that idea of hip hop, that it's so much spoken word poetry, is something that I like. And so that the idea that poetry is being made accessible and people thinking about poetry being accessible is something that people should start thinking about when they start writing. That, you know, it's all around them. They're hearing it all the time. You know, and they shouldn't be intimidated by it. And they should just start writing, and not be afraid to say what comes out. And don't be afraid if it doesn't look as good as you think other people's work is when you start, because other people's work wasn't as good as it is now when they started out.
That's very encouraging. Thank you. I was glad and interested when you mentioned the connection between music and poetry, because one of the questions I had was that singers and musicians go through scales to prepare for songs. Actors perform vocal and verbal exercises like tongue twisters before they go on stage or in front of a camera. What would you suggest as a routine warm-up for writers to do before they start writing to loosen their minds and their pens?
I can't think of anything in particular to do before you sit down before a particular writing session. But one of the things I do recommend is try to write regularly, even if you're not writing seriously. Like keep a pad and pencil or pen handy to jot down ideas if you have them, or if you have a smartphone with a note-taking capability. When something comes to mind, put it down on your word processing software or your note-taking software. Just when ideas come to mind, you know, jot them down. Just get in the habit of writing down things that come to mind, and be in the habit of writing, so that when you do sit down to write, you're used to the idea of writing. So it's not like something that you're like, oh my God, I've got to write.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry for the disturbance. I'm just having internet issue. I don't know what's going on right now. But with your question, I want to carry on that while writing the poetry, the thoughts just flow directly from your heart and you just write it on the paper. You don't even know that how it's going to end. So you think and you write. After giving an end to the poem, did you ever feel like it's too intimate to be unveiled, and you ever rethink about republishing it?
Only if I am mentioning individuals or I've written it for a specific person, do I have second thoughts about showing it to a wider audience.
All right.
You know, like if I write something for my wife for her birthday, I might show it to a critique group to get their feedback, but I would be hesitant to show it to the whole wide world without her permission.
Right, that's totally understandable. So if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Follow your heart. Your heart knows what it wants.
Amazing. Totally agree with that. Yes, Aisha, if you want to ask a question.
Yes. Do any aspects of your job as a geologist inform or assist your work as a writer?
Yes. Part of it is it has given me a great appreciation for the natural world and the beauty and the complexity and the interconnectedness. And also its fragility.
Ryan, as you have already told that while writing, you should follow your heart and do whatever you think that is true and that is right. So for the writers who are just starting to write, for example, I'm talking about myself, as I'm a student of English literature, so I want to write poetry and start it. So how should we start? Because there is, a writer's block in our head when we don't know that what topic we should start, to jot down that thing, to narrow down that stuff. So that is very difficult to come across that where should we start. So what advice would you give to the writers like us? From where should we start?
Start with what you love in terms of what moves you. Like, I can't speak for you. Like for me, a big thing is love in its many manifestations. There's one of the things like I talk to some of my friends about, like languages like Greek and Urdu have multiple words for the various meanings of love, and English has just one. And I kind of make this an analogy is those languages kind of try and divide love up into many different things, where English basically, as Lumper is saying, love is one all-encompassing thing that you manifest in many different ways. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. So a very humorous question from me before Aisha asks her question, that do you Google yourself?
I try and I never show up. There's so many Brian Hayeses out there that I'm so far down the list, unless I Google my author's website, I don't show up.
All right. Yeah, one day you will show up. I hope so. Yes, Aisha, over to you.
I just have one last question before I think we'd like to hear some of your poetry. Emerging poets can often feel like writing is just to pour your heart out and polish it a little bit, when it often demands revision and even several drafts. What advice can you offer such poets when it comes to the editing process and the patience it demands?
It depends. I can't remember the names. I know of some don't edit at all, except maybe for spelling. It's first draft they feel like that's the truest expression of their thoughts. And I know other poets who revise. For me, it's a combination. Some poems, I feel that I've got what I want to say in the first draft. Others, I do revise multiple times. It depends on the poem, what you're thinking about when you, as you're writing the poem, what you see when you have the poem in the end, and thinking about in your editing, are you going to substantially alter your vision of the poem?
Right, yeah, that's very encouraging to know that editing is not mandatory, especially if we like what we have.
Things like spelling and such, yes, you should go, you need to go back and check. But on that, you need to think about, am I happy with this? Can I tighten this up a little bit? I am all for trying to make a poem as tight and concise as possible.
That's lovely. Okay, so of course, interviewing a poet is not possible without hearing some poems. So if you could read a few, we'd be very grateful.
Okay. All right, I'll start with one that you mentioned from my author's website. This is one I actually wrote years ago, right after I graduated from university. Tea ceremony. Tea and honey fill lulls in conversation. Watching sunbeams play across the table, I draw warmth from my cup. Between sips of tea, speech lapses into irregular familiarity. Formality, silence. Steam rises sedately. Melange of cinnamon, clove, jasmine, and mint perfumes the room. You refill my cup, the porcelain pot, lustrous like lacquered wood, the same pot that I gave you years ago, when we drank brandy in our tea and plotted revolutions. Your glasses fog as you drink, soften the harsh lines of the world. You were always the more forgiving one. Afternoon wanes, the tea is cold. Taking my leave, I don coat and muffler. I won't say goodbye. We've forgotten the words.
Amazing. That was absolutely great one, and I really loved it when I read it first, and then I especially requested Aisha to tell you that we would love to hear this one. I myself really fond of tea. So when I read this poem about tea ceremony, the whole imagery and the whole scenario was just very awesome. So I wanted you to recite this for us. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
So we would like to hear another one from you, sir.
Okay. This next one is one that I wrote for a dear friend of mine from Pakistan. And I hope this will speak to of your members. Morning prayer. You rise each day to the muezzin's call, leave the warmth of the covers to kneel and clear your mind. Still, you remember the arms that held you in the wintry night, like the all-embracing arms of the beloved, full of eternal light. Love is love. It knows no boundaries. It fills whomever it wills. Just like the muezzin, hark to its calling and follow a more perfect way.
Absolutely awesome.
This one is more on a humorous bend. My wife keeps calling me incorrigible for my sense of humor and other things. Encourage me. I'm incorrigible. Encourage me. Headstrong, willful, irrepressible, never say die. That damn bad penny that keeps turning up. The cat you fed who won't go away. Like raindrops, I keep tapping softly at your window pane. Face wearing that same goofy grin that first won your heart. Trying to find another lucky lotto ticket despite all the odds. Never afraid to roll those dice one more time.
That was a wonderful and funny and sweet poem as well. Thank you for sharing it.
And if you have time for one more short poem.
Yes, I think we can do one more, and then the
Okay.
recording time will be up.
I am working on a collection of tankas. Tanka is a Japanese Zen verse form. It's predates haiku. It's 5 lines, 17 syllables, 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. And it's usually about seasonal, but I wrote them on a theme of love. And this is the one I shared with you. It's the last one for the collection. Adieu, love tanka 40. Love says its goodbyes. Eventually, we all leave. Memories are left. Candles burn bright through the night. Come morning, they are all spent.
Marvelous. Thank you so much. That was amazing to talk to you, to have a session with you. And we really appreciate that you gave us your time.
I am honored to have spent this time with you, that you wanted to speak to me. I enjoyed speaking to you very much. And I'm not asking for another interview, but anytime you wish to speak to me, feel free to contact me. I'd be glad to talk to you anytime.
Sure, sir, sure. It's a pleasure talking to you, and it was a pleasure meeting you. And Ma'am Khamsa just talked about you, and she told us about you, and we're really grateful and thankful to her as well. And thank you so much for giving us your precious time. It was very great meeting you.
It was a pleasure, and I wish you all the best and take care. And you have my best wishes for your country. I participate in a difference, Quakers, and our term for essentially praying for you is to say, we are holding you in the light, and I am holding your country in the light. So best wishes for all of you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very nice of you to say this thing.
Take care.
Thank you so much. We would like to end this meeting right now. So if you don't have to say anything else.
Other than thank you and best wishes.
Thank you so much, sir. Same here. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a lovely day.
You too.